The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is Wednesday, the 26th of August, and you're at Lunch and Learn. We're not unmuting people right now. Richard will be giving a talk about some of the new features of the training software, especially the trend screens. So when he gets done, we'll take a brief moment to get folks unmuted, and then we'll take whatever questions people may have. So without any further delay, Richard, it's all yours.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the people who gave us feedback on the listserv when I asked, what we can do to make releases easier. There's always a challenge to do that. I know as clinicians, when you come in the morning and you turn on your computer and you see there's an update, there's a real concern. Should I go with that update or not? I don't, I can't afford any glitches with my software this morning because I have a full day of clients coming in. And it's taken time, but I think everybody's cognizant of that pretty acutely now at New Mind. We've just had some meetings and some intense discussions, and they're ongoing, and I think everybody's on board now and on the same page. So we're going to be doing some fairly consistent and structured beta testing compared to what we've done, much higher testing levels, and more systematic, and we're going to try to fulfill the request. We're going to discuss the fact that there's upcoming stuff a few weeks in advance, maybe give you some peek previews, and we'll detail this more as time goes on. We have this update coming soon. It was slated for September 1st. I don't know if it still is. We're still getting input from beta testers, but it shouldn't be that much longer after that. That is always the challenge with software, is to get as much beta testing, make sure you found any bugs that are in it before you release it. And I think overall we do a pretty good job of it these days, but we're going to try to up our game and also give you more heads up in advance of what's going on. There are many things coming with this update, but the main thing, and some more bug fixes, and the main thing I want to focus on today is the major update that's coming, because it's something that's going to be right kind of in your face when you start to train with the software. And if you don't know it's there, you might miss out on something, but if you see the links, you also might be confused. So we want to try to get the word out regarding what we're doing in more detail. And what we're about to release is the trend analysis system. And that's better. I mean, that's different than the performance number that's at the center of the screen at the bottom. This is a new concept in trend analysis. So let's kind of dig into it and talk about it. We're going to try to make it really simple for everybody. It should be fairly intuitive, but what we've heard back from Rob and everybody is that it seems to be pretty intuitive and easy to use. We want to make sure that we get word out. So I'll start talking about how we evaluate EEG. Now, you know that you can look at the amplitudes of EEG, or you can look at the Z-scores, so people doing Z-scores. If you look at amplitudes or Z-scores, you'll see a consistent pattern in Z-score normalization and a consistent pattern in amplitude normalization. And one always correlates with the other. I mean, they go along with each other in perfect correlation. And we have to thank BrainMaster for making it possible to look at both at once. And they brought our field and brought me to that, clear conclusion that was what was going on. I find there's problems with the Z-scores in terms of how you use it, interpret it. It's effective, but with Z-scores, you're usually translating the Z-scores to networks or anatomy. So, what is the standard deviation doing in this location or with this network usually, or with this location, this region of interest in this anatomy. And then you compare that to their symptom and diagnosis. And then sometimes you may even relate that to behavior, depending on your training and background. In NewMind, we take the amplitudes instead of the z-scores, although you can look at the z-scores normalizing on our software, and we translate them to visual patterns. We think that the visual recognition of human beings is one of the most stunning and efficient systems for information extraction around. We're very good at it as a species. And using the trend screen, we can see in the visual patterns that are showing up, we feel a lot more than you can see in the model that uses networks and anatomy. That gets very complex. There's a lot of research still yet to be done in that area. A lot of it's conjecturing, and I think some of it's overreaching, but that's just my opinion of the literature. And there's certainly other people who are well-read who would disagree with me, but that's why, they say tomato, I say tomato, and we have two different systems. So depending on what way of interpreting things you're attracted to, you may be more attracted to one or the other. Since I'm a clinician, I tend to be more pattern recognition oriented than into the numbers game and into the complexity. So I've learned that by watching these component bands and how they behave over time, we get really reliable visual cues of how to interpret physiology and psychological states, as well as potential behaviors associated with them. And I think for a clinician, that's more intuitive and a lot easier to use and apply. And so that's why I champion this method. Now, part of the...
Absolutely apologize to interrupt, Richard. Are you showing a screen?
Yes, thank you, Martin. Thank you for interrupting. So that's why I apply this method, which now that Martin has cued me, I'm showing you, is the screen. And we've built the screen around that perspective. So as you all know, the majority of you, I have met with you personally and discussed how to do this, because we want everybody to fully understand what we're doing. And then we have lots of videos on it, but in brief, we're looking at factors of compression, and I'll go over this, convergence, and I'll go over that, and layering. And they all are ways of seeing how behavior, physiology, and states of consciousness are changing. And they also give you patterns to assess how the person's progressing. Now, it does take some practice to understand that. Maybe not as much as understanding networks and z-scores, but it does. And so we put these little numbers at the bottom of the screen to help. We want our activation between 2 and 3. We'd like to get the asymmetry values up to 1. We explain why. We want to see EMG at 3 or lower if we can. And so this is a pretty good trend screen here. You can see the delta is coming down, so it's compressing. And so are the alpha and beta are compressing from where they start. So everything's coming down. That compression means this person is exhibiting good inhibitory control and the brain is reorganizing. Okay, and then we can see that things are converging. And so let's talk about this in more detail. I'll go to the next. Now, that can be confusing to explain to clients. So what we've done is we've added another set of screens that make it easier to explain to clients and easier for you to interpret. And what we've done is at the top of the screen on the left, when you get the update, it'll say trend analysis, asymmetry, and activation. So you'll get much better visual presentations of asymmetry and activation quality and make it easier to explain to your clients. But you will get a trend analysis, which will take all of these values and roll them into one line where you can say, oh, you're doing your line's going up today or your line's going down, which I know is something that you've all wanted to have, everybody does. And I've always thought would be great too, but it's taken us years to evolve this thing because, you know, it has to be accurate and reliable and valid. Now, you won't see these up there, and that threw me at first when I logged in. It says, and the reason I didn't see them, and when I called up Tim, and he said, well, you've got to have either eyes open or eyes closed clicked. Okay, you have to have made that choice on your setup screen when you set up the protocol. And so that's important. There's a section there where you can select eyes open or eyes closed. And so you have to tell the software whether you're using eyes open or eyes closed, or it can't give you an accurate trend analysis. So that's one caveat. Make sure you've selected eyes open or eyes closed state for the training file on the plan info screen. And yeah, usually presents that and asks you to do it, but in case you didn't, or you have a clients in the past that you haven't done it on, and you're going, where's my trend analysis? It's because you haven't clicked on that button. So when you select trend analysis, this is the screen that comes up. And at the top is our trend performance points, and it goes from 0 to 100. So you get 0 to 100 points for how well you performed. And that's about as simple and straightforward as we can get. But to make that happen, you have to put together a lot of complex algorithms and metrics to be accurate. Is a real trick, but we believe that we've achieved that. And the metrics we use to come up with that are layering, compression, and convergence. And you can see them right here. And they're listed right here. The color code, green is layering, red is compression, and that kind of what I would call pinkish beige is convergence. There's probably a better way to describe that color, but I am not a visual artist. As the layering improves, okay, so the layering gets in the right range, and that will go up and down. Compression should go down, and convergence should go down. As we see these go down and the layering improve, we see this go up. Now in this picture, you can see the layering is pretty steady, and I chose this one because it's useful to have one variable steady. And then you can see as compression and convergence go down, it goes up. And you can see the convergence goes up here and the compression goes up, and your trend performance goes down. In this particular case, these tend to be going together, and compression and convergence often do go together, as I have explained to you all the time. Sometimes they go in opposite directions, like right here. You can see their convergence is going up, but compression is going down, and so our value is going down. It's at a lower level. So by studying these examples and running the numbers, we can see that this is quite responsive to all three of these critical visual pattern that occur on a trend screen that everybody's universally able to recognize once we point them out. So we're computing this from layering, compression, and convergence, those three metrics. Now again, just for people who haven't caught up or didn't quite get the memo, this is an example of modest compression. This is the one I showed at the beginning, where you can see that the delta is going down, theta is staying pretty much the same, and then alpha and beta are going down somewhat. So we're getting some modest compression here. Now, here is very strong compression. You notice this is the same person, but this time, instead of delta being up at 14, it's down at 10. And theta is below 8 all the way around, where here sometimes it's going up to 10. So everything's compressing quite a bit. And we're getting quite a bit of convergence too, if you notice it. And again, this is an expression of the exertion of inhibitory control during training. And most people, it's not voluntary, it's involuntary. They're watching the screen get dark and light. They're getting feedback through operant conditioning, and their brain is inhibiting and altering networks. And this is the pattern that we see when it's reorganizing. Now, if we go here, we can get an idea of compression that's maybe a little more visually clear. Here we have delta, theta, alpha, beta, and high beta. This is the mean, okay? So you can't say it's the norm because the norm is a range, but this is the mean value, roughly, at these locations, C3 and C4. These are roughly the means. And you can see delta, theta, alpha, and beta, and you can see that overlays the delta here. And you can see that delta is close to its mean. Theta is a little below, alpha is a little below, beta is a tad low, and high beta seems to be right on the money here. So as you train, you can see that these are coming down and more into normal range. Now they vary a bit, but here you can see this came into more normal range. We got some convergence there, and we see the alpha starting to try to come up to more normal range, but then it goes down. Delta goes below. That's common. Compression overshoots. We go past normal range and it holds. But then after a while, after you train for, 8, 10, 12 sessions, a lot of times the brain starts to go back up after it compresses, but it goes up in a newly reorganized fashion. And this is the non-linearity of the brain as it reorganizes. This is what throws us all when we look at pre-post maps and trend screens. So, so compression is an important phenomena during the first initial 8 to 10 sessions, and it indicates a robust response to training. Whereas layering is the gradual reorganizing of the component bands over time into a more normative pattern of delta, then theta, and then alpha, beta, 12 and then 10 and then 8 and 6 on these component bands. Again, compression reflects inhibitory control, layering reflects normalization. The brain reorganizes through enhanced inhibitory control or compression, and the brain normalizes through layering. So just to kind of make it more visual, here we have phase 1 where we're getting compression, and then we get compression and convergence, very good convergence here. You can see the alpha's gotten better, 94 to 99, and beta asymmetry is looking good. EMG is low. Activation's a bit low. And then we get here where we get compression, convergence, and reorganization. Suddenly you notice that the activation's a little bit higher here again. But now we have good symmetry. So we have good symmetry and good activation and good EMG. Now we're getting phase 3 where we're getting compression, convergence, and reorganization. Layering is better. Now it's still not optimal, and we may never get it at this location. And that's why training locations is important. We may have to go to another location and train that. And if we do and we come back, we'll often find this is normalized. I found that often when I compared z-scores with these metrics, that's exactly what occurred. So here again, convergence, delta and theta amplitudes differ significantly, and then delta and theta amplitudes converge onto the same values. You can see these are two thetas are far apart, and these deltas are going back and forth, but here they're very tightly together, almost in unity. Right there, alpha unity. Okay. Now, just to re-emphasize what I was saying about the phases of training, that initially you're getting a lot of compression, and that's what you want. You can see here we get a lot of compression. Delta's down, these are coming down. There's your compression. And you'll get that session after session after session. Then eventually, as you get down the road, 8, 10, 12 sessions, it depends on how disordered the person is, it'll start to trend back up and reorganizes its layering. Now for this person, their normative delta is not 12 because we're seeing as they reorganize in their layering more evenly, their natural deltas around 10. That's optimal for their brain. You're never going to make everybody's brain the same. And that's why we have to allow for 2 or 3 standard deviations, differences from the norms that I gave you back here. But you can see the pattern, and that's what's so good about, you know, our pattern recognition system. We can see these patterns pretty clearly. So all 3 metrics result in a single measure of trend performance. So that is our major trend performance system, where it comes from and what it reflects. And it's kind of fun to look at those other 3 metrics and see how they inform this. It's quite accurate. It's not perfect, but it's a very good measure. And we will be adding this eventually to the home training, so that when the home training client's finished, they have the option of looking to see how they trained. Now, for some clients, you'll want that, and others you won't, and you know, for different reasons. But that will now be an option, and we think that'll make home training much more motivating to people, a lot of people, and interesting. And for a lot of you clinicians, it'll make explaining to the clients what's going on, and maybe give you a more simple and easy to translate format. So let's look at the other trend analysis features that you've been using. You've been using numbers for beta asymmetry, alpha asymmetry, and activation. But the development staff, and Tim in particular, came up with some really cool ways of looking at this. And this is where I think finally we're achieving a communication between clinicians and developers at NewMind, unlike at other places. And we've gone through a lot of pain and self-searching for all of us, and hard work to get to this point. But I think we've achieved a new level, and we can see what the guys at development have done, which is really cool. So you go up to your trend analysis, asymmetry, and activation links, and click on asymmetry, and look at this. Now you can see beta asymmetry right away. Pattern recognition is quite easy. How much green? You can see where they went green and how they went green. How much was their alpha asymmetry in the zone? And then you can look at beta and see how much they were in the zone. You can see right at a glance right away, this person was in a really negative mood zone with really a good moment here. And you can look up here and say, well, their anxiety was pretty good, zone was up here, but the mood was down there. And you can look here and see the patterns up here. Mood was improved, but now they seemed more anxious. And what you often see, and many of you have commented on, is that, you know, when one improves, the other goes the other way. You know, so mood goes down, anxiety goes up. Anxiety goes up, mood goes down. And what you're seeing here is what I've been talking about, presenting for years in a much clearer version, how the brain plays this balancing act between left and right hemisphere. As anxiety goes up, the mood tries to compensate and mute it. And as mood lifts, anxiety goes up and tries to move you more towards an active solution to what's creating the anxiety. And I think you'll all see that more clearly moving forward. And here's activation. Now look at activation. Activation is a proxy measure of glycogen utilization. It's not a perfect one. There's a fair amount of noise in it, but you know, reviewing the literature on this, we concluded it's pretty good. It's pretty good, and so that tells you how much energy your brain's kind of using. And here you can see your values. Here's 2. We like to stay between 2 and 3. So you get above 2, and you can start to see green. This person's getting into a more optimal energy utilization zone, and that means they're getting healthier. The brain's recovering. You know, so in physiological terms, they're improving. So if they're eating a better diet, you would expect to see more green here. You get both sides, left and right hemisphere here, and you can see that these 2 hemispheres are moving roughly along the same lines, but it looks like the left side is using a little bit more than the right. And that should probably be pretty much of a trend that you see most of the time. The left tends to run a little hotter than the right in terms of energy consumption, because it tends to be more of a verbal cognitive processing region. Whereas the right tends to be a little bit more of the mood processing and spatial processing. Now, they aren't exclusive, but they tend in those directions. So I think that that's a really neat way of looking at brains moving forward. And so here's another session. Here's somebody cruising along here with a pretty good session, good alpha asymmetry, good beta asymmetry, activation getting up there 1.9, 1.8, 2.2, 2.5 on EMG, pretty good. And here's our analysis pattern. Just to take another look, here we see we're pretty flat on layering, pretty good on that. There you go. It's pretty steady across. We're getting good improvements in compression, getting down there. Lowest point was up front, but we got a good few periods here. And convergence was pretty good and steady through the whole thing. And you can see we got pretty steady improvements here reflecting, well, we went down here and we got a big improvement there. We stayed the same and went up here. We got an improvement there. So you can see pretty good, averaging 70 to 80 points here. And this person's primarily in the green zone. That was great on both alpha and beta asymmetry. So this person's looking pretty good. Now the activation is only partially in the green. So activation is sometimes one of the last things to occur because you have to normalize anxiety, depression, the imbalances, calm the brain down, as Martin says, spool down. That term actually comes from jet engine technology, which is, I think, why Martin uses it. We have different terms in physiology for it. But I like the image a lot. And so this spooling down results in a healing process, a recovery process, improved sleep, improved immune function, and we get that physiological repair going, and we get the right nutrition, then more energy becomes available for the brain to operate properly. So here we have another session that we ran, and this is interesting because it gives you a picture of what happens when you have beta artifact. And this is one of the frustrating things about, I know for everybody, about EEG. And it's easy to lose sight of it if you're using Z-score, but if you're using pattern recognition and trend screens, you can see right away that you're getting inaccurate information. So we've got EMG higher on the right than the left. That's going to throw off our beta asymmetry right away. We know it's not that reliable. Alpha, of course, is fairly independent. We know that's reliable. Activation is going to be thrown off a bit because it's going to be overemphasized because the muscle tension will make beta seem artificially high. So the beta to slow wave ratio will be off. So it will make this person look like they're running hotter than they are, utilizing more energy than they are. But you know that because you can see it here and especially here. Now, let's see how that affects our analysis. Boom. Boy, you can really see how it jumps out at you here. And you can see it's jumping out at you because there's a big deviations in the layering. And those big deviations in the layering means that the beta layering is off. So it captures that the beta layering is off. And if the beta layering is really off, you get big anomalies here. And you go like, that's too big to be true. And I can see that the layering's off, and I go back, I can see that the beta is off. So it's a really cool way to capture, oh, okay, well, this is how you really performed. And these are just anomalies. They don't really tell you how you performed. They're really useful. And then here you can see, if you click on the asymmetry, you can see really where that, oh, it was the beta asymmetry was off. You can say, well, something was really off on the layering. What was it? Oh, it was the beta asymmetry. It was the beta was really off, and that's what distorted the session. And here you can see the alpha asymmetry is barely off at all. And you can also see under activation, it threw the activation off, and that was during this big beta asymmetry. So it makes it much easier to capture the effect of artifact. Okay, and then we have finally low power trend analysis. If you're looking at, you see this is fairly low power. Delta's at 8, that's pretty low. Theta's at 8. The layering's good, but alpha's down at 6. That's way too low for alpha. Shouldn't be going below 7 or 8. Certainly not below 6. So we look at trend performance here, and we can see trend performance is pretty steady. We had a drop here. We did quite well on compression and convergence, it looks like. Came down, did well. This stayed overall the same. Okay, so let's look at Drowsy. Here we have somebody training, and their delta's coming down, and you can see the trend performance is going up. We can see that the layering is good. We can say we're getting good compression, good convergence, but then all of a sudden they get drowsy. You know that because delta's going up. And when they get drowsy, all of a sudden we get something going wrong here in compression. The compression's off, all right? And immediately we notice that that's the delta, and that's from drowsiness. So here we're getting a different pattern. It's not saying the layering is off so much. It's not an artifact, but that the compression is off. So it's even able to distinguish to a degree between those two factors, which is really nice. And so you can see that in this particular thing. And I think that's where we end. Okay, so we got 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to unmute people, see if there's any comments or questions on.
While you're unmuting people, Richard, I'm going to make another comment having tested this.
Yes, Rob.
One of the things that is really, really useful, and I found this out with, especially with mentoring people, is you will have patients that, you think you're doing pretty well, and you think your treasure students are looking pretty good, and they're not reporting benefit. So when you can look at this and see that they're training well, it begins to help you look at what's going on in their lives. They're training well. Why are they not responding well to neurofeedback? And this came up with one of my mentees on Monday. And as it turned out, when we started talking about the trend screens we were looking at, and I said, it looks like, he trains okay. What's going on in his life? Well, this is a kid who's works for a lawyer, preparing to take the LSATs, has a wife who is 1 month away from delivering of a new child, and all this happening in a pandemic. So that's a lot of social and work pressures that are stressors. So those are working against you. So even though they're training well, if you think, well, gee, they're training well, what's going on? It provokes you to begin to ask more questions of your client or patient as to what's happening in their lives. I thought that was something I wanted to add to that.
Okay, well, almost got everybody unmuted. I'm just about there.
Okay. So I found this very useful, especially, like I said, with, when you're trying to really assess, when things are looking good, but the patient's saying, well, gee, I don't know, I'm not noticing a whole lot, or I'm not getting a lot, or whatever out of it. So it's a great tool. I think people are really going to enjoy using this.
Okay, thanks for your beta input, Rob. Rob really thoroughly goes over this stuff when he gets it. It's very helpful always. He finds a lot of our bugs.
Richard, I have
Yes.
a question.
Uh-huh.
This is Lauren. I was wondering if you could just give us an example, like pick one of these screens and just walk us through what you would say to a client in giving feedback.
Okay. We could just look at this one and say, okay, we trained today and you did really quite well. You did excellent. But then something happened here. And when I looked at the screen, this was you getting drowsy. Okay. And so you lost points getting drowsy. How'd you sleep last night? Did you sleep well? How have you been? Well, I don't, that's pretty good, I guess. I went to bed at around 1 o'clock. You stay up pretty late. Yeah, what times you get up? Around 6 or 7. My usual 6, I guess, my usual time. That's not quite enough sleep. Well, I don't really need that much sleep, you know. And I had work I had to finish last night, and kind of an engineer response. And so, well, can you see that you lost efficiency here? You know, that the line went down, it didn't go up. Yeah. Well, you probably got drowsy because you didn't get enough sleep. And but then you recovered, which is good. We like to see that. So overall, this was a good performance, but you're a little drowsy. We might want to get a little more sleep. So that would be maybe how I would interpret it.
So you basically could say the same thing, though, if just the way we have been doing it before
Yes.
this came in, where you just look at the delta line and you can see, you know, there was a spike there around 15, 20 minutes. So we assume that they got drowsy. Is that kind of the
Yes.
same
Oh,
idea?
absolutely. But the client is overwhelmed by all of the lines. I mean, after a while, you get really good at it. You know what it all means. You're an expert. That's why they're paying you. They don't really understand. I mean, I have clients who are very bright business people, you know, and lawyers and stuff. And they look and say, well, I don't know what that screen means. You've been telling me for, 25 sessions. I'll leave that up to you. But with a single line like this, hey, they all watch the stock market. They all know, performance lines. We all learn in 6th, 7th, 8th grade how to read a graph. So they can tell up is good, down is bad. And that's what we've really needed, I think, for our clients and to explain it to them. Now, if somebody wants to get more complex and they think they understand more, you can always go down here and say, well, that's because of this. But generally, you have this. And now, when people are training at home, and that's what I'm most excited about, that was my main reason for wanting this, is I wanted a trend screen. And we started working on this like 2 years ago. I wanted a trend screen that when you're home training, you could look at and was fairly reliable representative of what you had done training at home. I even suggested we might put smiley faces on the peaks and frowny faces on the darks, but then I was persuaded by, interestingly enough, by support staff that might not be a good idea. And I said, yeah, well, maybe you're right on that. Jason and Jordan will both look at it. I don't know if that's a good idea. So good input from them. And so that's the kind of the rationale. That
Okay, thank you.
Good question too. Any other comments? Confusion?
Yeah, this is Bobby Sanchez in Colorado, and I am wondering about that green line. Do you want it to be, should it be sloped upward, or is it just measuring trending or training quality at each point?
We really do want it up. Yeah, there's no caveats here. That was the point. We wanted something, either you're doing well and it's going up, or you're not doing so well and it's going down. It's plain and simple.
Okay, thank you.
And I can't tell you how many people in the chiropractic community have complained about that, because the physicians really they like things pretty simple and straightforward, and they like to be able to explain it really simply to the clients. I think some of the counseling community is more comfortable with a little bit more complexity, because we deal with that with people's behaviors all the time and trying to explain them to them.
So the trend line then collapses in one screenshot, basically what's going on the very bottom with all three. It just gives you one.
That's correct. Yeah, thank you.
And then you can jump to the bottom and look where it went down and what was causing that.
Yes. Yeah. It's in a very easily seen visual pattern. But you don't have to. This makes it so you can just run the protocol and say, how are they performing? And how many performance points are they getting? Now, we will add points system in there, but we don't want to put the big number in there until we've had a lot of people use this for a bit. But you can always pick out the numbers, say, oh, well, you're between 60 and 70 or 70 or 80. Last time you were almost up to 90. What happened? you have for breakfast? Did you have a fight with somebody today? Traffic really bad? So you can begin to track their behaviors. But this is just to really make it as simple and intuitive as possible, and inform you that the brain is recovering, reorganizing and recovering.
Is there a way to look at all three of these screens with the client the way we're looking at them now, with the trend screen on the very top and then the middle and the bottom? Or is it just the two on the bottom you can?
No, we just have this screen or this screen.
Okay.
Didn't want to put in too many options at first. You begin putting in too many options, and then your software gets so complicated, people get confused. So we're trying to keep this simple. That's my job, is to whine and complain and moan and upset people and yell at them because I don't think it's simple enough. That's my job, and I've got a rep for that already. But I have to play the devil's advocate. I have to be the cranky guy. But like I say, I think we're now at a point where I don't have to do that anymore. I think we got a really solid team here. And the fact that we've pulled this off, I think, is proof.
And it's pretty simple to just simply go between the trend screen, which is your top one, when you run done with the session, then you hit trend analysis. You can go back and forth between those two. They're just hitting those little tabs that, as Richard showed you. And the other thing is that you see the little arrows there. You can go back and forth with those trend screens in the same way you do with the trend analysis screens. You can hit that arrow right or left and go to previous sessions, and then you can see if the patterns are staying the same or changing or improving or what have you. So just a click away.
Okay.
Hi, this is Tracy Lefebvre. Quick question. Is there a performance point range that they're shooting for, or is it just comparing, like last session was up in the 90 range, this session's up in the
that's a good question. That was an important issue that we discussed. That's why we don't have a number or anything there, because we're beta testing it. It's a new metric, and you can't. In our mind, we can't just slap a number on it, range on it. We have a theoretical idea, of course, when we created it, but it was constructed so that when you get close to 100, all the values of concern tend to be in an optimal range. So really, you're trying to get as close to 100 as you can. But we will have an average range, just like we do with the map system, in a high range and a low range. After we gather data for several months, maybe 6 months, I like to have data n sizes in the thousands from hundreds of clinics before I run things statistically, because that enhances the accuracy of the data we're getting. So we will be giving you that eventually. Making sure everybody's unmuted.
Quick comment, Richard. I sent you
Yes.
an email with an observation. It's background stuff.
Okay. Good
Just
to know.
check it after this.
Yes, appreciate any feedback we can get, Martin.
Oh, another good comment, Richard, or for people to understand, because oftentimes people are get a little bit confused by the training efficiency score, is in this case here, you're seeing someone whose session wasn't too terribly bad. The overall trend performance stayed up, pretty good. but the training efficiency is only at 11 versus at say 20 or 30. And I think that helps people better understand too, that that number gives you a sense of how things are, but someone could be having a score of a training efficiency of 27 and their training equally as good, but maybe not as good as somebody who's got an efficiency score of 15.9. So that's a relative one. That's good. That's useful to me to look at consistency with a singular patient, but not to compare one patient to another.
Yeah, in a sense, you can compare one patient to another. I think I mentioned that at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
And with this metric, you can.
Oh, with those, yes, definitely, absolutely.
Whereas the training efficiency, you can't really.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's what I was trying to say. If I didn't
It's
make
way
it
too sensitive to individual differences.
Yep.
You know, Richard, everything that you introduce enhances our ability to give good care. And I want to tell you how much I appreciate the thought that goes into this, let alone the hours and hours. I can't even imagine how many hours went into conceptualizing it and then turning it into something that we can use. And I know we all really appreciate that. And that's kind of why we're new minders, is because this is something that's always happening. And I always know that you're thinking and planning what's the next innovation we can add that will make the work that we do more efficient and more collaborative and just better and better. So thank you.
Thanks, Judy.
Definitely. Thank you.
Really appreciate the feedback. I know the team never hears this stuff, but I'll tell them it's on the video. But this was a real huge team effort. And for me, this was an example of how we've evolved together as a team and broken through all of the differences we have in training and how we see things and understand things, and really come together to create a really complex and this was a real tough project. Like I said, it took a couple of years, a lot of meetings, a lot of back and forth. Tim built a massive tool where we could just run client data, you know, in large amounts, just and look at it from every single aspect. And he did it for lots of different metrics. And we even tried brain rate, which we may eventually add in, which was proposed by Papa Jordanova with background in physics. But it didn't really meet our criteria enough. And so we eventually evolved into this one. And, you know, Sean was saying, well, what can we do something with layering? And I said, I don't think so. I said, it's too complex of a concept. So he started thinking about it, and he came up with some ideas about how they could do layering. And then he and Tim got together and said, well, if we do it this way, we could have a single line. And so then we tried that out, and then we started running client data on it. And we eventually got this. But I mean, this is after trying all this other stuff, including, you know, the Pop-Jordanova equation was pretty complex to institute, much more than this in some ways, although this was more challenging because of the way these factors operate. But we got, you know, it was a real team effort. We all got it together and really, I think, pulled it off.
Quick
Richard, I have
comment.
another.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, just quick question. What would this look like if you have somebody with busy mind that just that line doesn't come down? What's your trend performance screen going to look like?
Or if the blue's constantly up, that would throw
Correct.
off the layering. The layering would be much lower. And then you wouldn't get as much compression either. So you'd be less, the layering would be lower and you get less compression because you'd be violating both principles. Now, if you wanted to know exactly which one, of course, you'd have to look down here. Your clients aren't going to have a clue or even know what that means.
Well, you could have a very tight blue line, alpha line. They could be close together, but
so
just very, very high.
Yeah, so your conversions could be quite tight. Although that's usually not the case with people with high alpha. Usually the convergence is off. It tends to be with the human brain that the more that you violate the norms of amplitude, the more that convergence and compression and layering are off, the more they move away from a normative pattern. Because they all tend to move as a group, because they're also deeply interrelated within the brain.
Gotcha.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in Mexico City, so I think there's nobody else here in Mexico
Right.
that uses NewMind. But in regard to the training session that we find in NewMind at the page, will it also show layering, compression, and conversions now, or is this going to be maybe later on, not just in the graph?
Yeah, on the map, are you saying, is it going to show that?
No, on the on NewMind maps, but in the web page in the client summary.
Yeah, in the client summary. Oh, if you go under sessions, we may add it to sessions. That's a good suggestion. Again, something like that's a pretty big project, but it's a good suggestion. I appreciate the suggestion. They may have already thought of it in development. At this point, they're thinking ahead of me. So, they're moving pretty fast these days. So I'm starting to play catch up the other way around.
All right. And I've got a second question. Is there a possibility to also see the trend performance details, not just within one session, but as an average of different sessions or between sessions?
Yes, that will come up once we establish the metrics. So once we have 3 to 6 months of data amongst, hundreds of clinics, and we can take large sample sizes, several of them, and then run them, and then be sure of the numbers, then we can construct values to standard deviations, norms, and then we could potentially even put together a graph of performance changes. And this will be very different from beta to theta ratio, which never worked, or just looking at how theta went down or beta went up. We tried that for a decade, and it never gave you a real idea of progress. And that's why I abandoned those things long ago as useless. And that's why we started looking at pre-post maps. But even that can be difficult to grasp. I think this makes it a lot easier. And so if this turns out like I think we will, then the trend performance graph may be even better than a pre-post map in terms of locations you're looking at. In terms of globals, obviously you still need the pre-post map, but who knows, someday we may be able to look at global trend performance. So each thing's a step, just a slow progress.
Okay, thanks a lot, Richard.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Yannick, for the question. Good question.
So one other question here. In theory, then you could look at this trend performance screen and make a determination when it's time to switch locations, or even have the client take a break if they're ready to take a break from neurofeedback. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a tremendous asset when you want to make those decisions. I'm really glad you brought that up.
I have an example, Richard, of a screenshot that is someone with busy mind. And what I'll do is I'll try to do the same chart you've done. I'll take a screenshot of the.
Oh yeah, great.
Then I'll post it on the listserv, folks, and just say this is what busy mind might look like, because they don't train as well. Those graphs look quite different. I was trying to find an eyes open one with the alpha was way up there. I have one example I can show you, so I'll do that.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Great,
You bet.
great, good stuff. Okay, well, we're getting past the hour here. Thanks for your comments and questions. It was really great to have a variety of people weigh in. Feel free to email us further questions about this if you want. You know, again, our target date is early September here, but I have to confirm with the team when that's going to be, and then we'll let you know ahead of time. In the meantime, this will be posted on the YouTube channel for New Mind in the next day or two, and if you want to review it again, you can. And when it shows up on your screen on the update, then you can review it then too.
And I'll let folks know, especially the newer folks. A while back, I wrote a manual for the New Mind New Mind software, and it's way outdated at this point. So I'm revising that manual. And Richard, some of these slides are so lovely. I'm going to use them, if you don't mind, for the manual to demonstrate the point.
Absolutely fine.
I take a lot of screenshots, so those will go in the manual eventually. And that's open for anybody who wants to have access to it. Just let us know. We'll give you access to the manual, but it's being updated.
Okay, guys, we'll have a great week, and we'll see you Friday. We got anything coming up Friday? Maps, discussion?
Nothing yet. We're open for discussion or maps or further discussion on the software here. So we'll see what people shoot us between now and then.
All right, everybody. Hope you have a great week. Stay safe.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.